Welcome to Building Resilience, a podcast by Hatch for insights around risk management for sound business practices.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Joelle Pang, your hosts for today's episode.
In the last episode, we had Matthew Kramer with us. We discussed catastrophic risk management and how it applies to operations in heavy industries and metallurgical facilities. And today we have Todd Steen with us. Todd is joining us from the Saskatoon office as a senior mining consultant in the Mining Infrastructure Group. Todd has spent the last 20 years in various roles in underground mines and has recently been working on one of our global risk management programs focusing on underground mine safety. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
To start us off, what are some of the causes that negatively impact mine safety?
Well, there's a number of areas that affect mine safety, and they go from the smaller items, the cuts and scrapes and near-miss incidents that maybe have the potential for minor injuries, but the worst that could happen is minor injury. But then you really also have, what we sometimes call the MUEs, or the material unwanted events, that are the big ones, right? These are the ones that no mine ever wants to have. Potentially it's fatalities or it's severe corporate reputational damage type events. And so these are the ones that are game changers for companies, and that companies are really investing a lot of time and effort in making sure that they avoid.
So, Todd, are those related to the structural integrity? Are they related to, loss of containment? What are we exactly looking for when we look at unwanted events that impact mine safety?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we talk about some of those big ones, those are the types we often are looking at. For example, if you think about hoists and shafts, it's dropped objects and it's structural failures and releases of energy and things like what you just mentioned, and the types of events that could cause uncontrolled releases of energy that ultimately can cause severe damage, right? And in addition to that, in other areas of the mine, in areas like affecting mine infrastructure, like mine ventilation, you could be thinking about things like events that cause loss of mine ventilation or catastrophic ground failures in the mine and unexpected fall of ground, areas like that. So,
right. Do you have an example that you can give of a recent incident and what we learned from it?
Well, it's an interesting question. We had one, obviously, that I think a lot of people heard about recently at the Totten mine in Sudbury. And, although I'll say that this one's really worth mentioning and it's worth thinking about, it was an incident where they were lowering equipment in their shaft and it somehow dislodged and blocked the shaft and caused some damage that made the cage or the elevator for the operators or for the underground workforce inoperable. And ultimately that prevented the workers from being able to get out of the mine for a little while. And although I wouldn't necessarily say without some additional detail that event in itself was an MUE, it had the potential to be an MUE unless that equipment had the potential to fall all the way down to the bottom of the shaft and into an area where maybe people may have been working. That level of detail. But the part of the incident that's sort of interesting to me was the aspect related to that need to have your second egress from the mine up and operable and able to be used. So, again, in this case, you've got an event that has occurred that's blocking egress from your main shaft, and it's for a significant period of time. So you need to find a way to get your workers out of the mine. Well, all mines need to have a second egress out of their mine, and it's a regulatory item here, and certainly in all Canadian jurisdictions. And now the workers are reliant on being able to use that second egress. And in this case, it was a ladder way in another shaft. So, to me, the key here is that an incident has occurred now in this case, and that's unfortunate. But now I need my backup systems and my procedures and my mine rescue systems and all those things to function properly so that it doesn't become an MUE. And in this case, it looks like all their systems functioned as designed, and they took the time to make a plan, developed a safe work plan, engaged their mine rescue systems and people, and got their workers out of the mine safely. So, kind of a success story from that perspective. So.
That's excellent. I guess one of the lessons learned from it is that having that secondary egress, which acts as a mitigation control, it's critical to have that in place. Although it's required by code in Canadian jurisdictions, that may not be the case around the world. And if there is one lesson learned from it, the importance of having that, because in the absence of that, I think the results would have been different, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes to the whole approach, the common approach here when you start to think about these events is, number one, can we prevent them in the first place? But number two, something's happened. Well, now we need to mitigate it and make sure that we absolutely minimize the potential loss or damage or injury or any potential negative consequences. So.
Absolutely. And never say never, right? I mean, although this mine has been in operation for many years, and likely has never happened in the past, but doesn't mean that it never will. So it's good to have that control in place.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So you touched about preventing and mitigating controls. So how would you go about approaching incidents such as the one you previously mentioned in preventing them as well as mitigating them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I've seen a number of mines over my career in mining, and I've seen a number of ways of approaching these things, but it all, and different places have different names for how they approach these things. But I would say it's becoming a more and more consistent approach, and it's a methodical approach to me where, for the given area, first you're really trying to understand, okay, what is the area I'm looking at? And so maybe it is hoists and shafts, right? And that area. And once you've defined the area that you're looking at, I think really you start to think about, well, what are the potential MUEs that could take place in this area? You can think about what's happened at that particular mine or at that company, but you can also think globally and think about what incidents have happened that we know of around all of hoists and shafts in all the world. And that becomes a fairly big list when you think about MUEs that have happened in hoisting and in shafts around the world. So we make sure, I think, to involve operations people in those discussions. And we also involve subject matter experts that kind of have that long history in again, and using my example here, hoists and shafts, right? And so we sort of jump into an exercise in that by thinking about, once we've thought about the possible MUEs that can occur, we use what's often called the bow tie approach, where we think about, on one side of the bow tie, what are the things that could cause an MUE? So is it improper procedures? Is it corrosion? Is it loss of mechanical integrity, poor maintenance practices, all those kinds of things? And on the other side of the bow tie, we think about, okay, again, now the incident has happened. What are the things that we need to have in place so it doesn't become an MUE, or to minimize the impact of that incident? So again, what are those mitigating things that you can put in place? So is it your mine rescue procedures? Maybe it's regular inspections of, in the case of the example I just talked about, the functionality of your second egress, alarm systems to make sure the workforce is aware that an incident has occurred, and to get to refuge, stench gas systems, all those kinds of things. So, I think once you've thought about the causes of MUEs and the mitigations that exist for once an event has happened, now you think about, well, how do I make sure that those systems to either prevent or mitigate an MUE are functional when I need them? And so, now you really to start to think about the barriers or the critical controls that you need to have in place to make sure that all those systems are functional. So, to me, if you've got a mitigated barrier for an MUE around having a functional second egress system, well, what do I have to do to make sure that that second egress is ready to go when I need it? Well, I'm going to inspect it. I'm going to train employees on the use of that system. I'm going to have my, maybe I'll run drills once in a while with mine rescue team to make sure they know what they're going to do if that case should happen where they need to use that ladderway, right? And so it's all well and good to have these controls in place, but if they don't work when you need them, they're useless, right? So in the example we talked about at Totten, clearly the company had looked after their second egress. It was in a usable state, and they were able to use it to get the miners out of the mine, right?
Excellent. And this bow tie analysis that you mentioned, along with the ICMM's critical control management, is key. But also, it's important to mention that one of the keys in establishing these list of controls is to have an idea of what's currently best in industry, best in the world, right? Like you mentioned, some of this is, bound by code in certain jurisdictions, but in order for us to really come up with a comprehensive list of controls that mitigate or prevent these events, we really have to have this benchmarking approach to it and look at it holistically across different sites, different mines, different geographical locations, and analyze and come up with the best controls in the world as opposed to applicable only to a certain area.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You can fall into a trap sometimes. And before joining Hatch, I had a long career in operations. And if all you think about is what you've seen at the mine that you're used to, you're missing a lot, and yeah, it really is critical to look at what's being done out there. And you can do that through your vendors, through your engineering firms, through working with other companies, with other sites within your company. There's a number of ways to do it, right? But it is critical to layer that into the program that you ultimately build. Yeah.
Right. And not only look at it as a mine, look at it as an operation, right? There may be cases where you may be able to look at a control that exists in a different industry, like oil and gas, for example, that you may be able to go in, take it and apply it to your operations if it means that it's going to do a better job at controlling that event.
Yeah, no, that's a great point for sure.
And we're uniquely positioned to do that because as Hatch, we have arms in energy infrastructure and mining, when we're able to look at it from different angles as opposed to looking at it from one angle. And that's one of our key successes has been in executing these types of programs, is being able to bring that expertise, that cross discipline expertise, and come up with a list of controls that are coherent and that are applicable to the industries that we're involved in.
Absolutely, completely agree.
And so, speaking of mine safety, what are the challenges that we face when we try to come up with these mitigation and prevention measures?
That's a good question. I mean, at every mine, you've got a lot of priorities, right? You won't be in business if you're not producing efficiently and being, productive and effective. And so you've always got that as kind of your underpinning, must have, right? And so you've got a number of competing priorities, and ultimately a lot of mines, I would say, placed a lot of attention on safety, but that's, in my view, that's evolved over the years from that attention to personal safety and sort of all incidents to that more heavy focus these days, especially on, again, what we call the MUEs, or the really big ones, right? And it's not to say you shouldn't focus on the small stuff, because you need to, and that's part of what builds your safety culture. But I've really seen that evolution to where companies are pouring a lot more effort into really understanding the big stuff and really eliminating those big incidents that can be the real drastic impact type incidents on employees, on families, and on the company itself. And so that's been a great evolution in my mind, to see that come about in the way that it has, and see that type of focus, because I think that's really critical. So.
Yeah, and we're up for the challenge in helping our clients, and also being able to tie the events to the business impact, right? With increased focus on operations to produce more, be more efficient. Obviously, these events are becoming more and more common, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point you make. Across our company, we've got a number of folks in our company that are ex-operations people, whether they're plant managers, mine managers, hoist and shaft superintendents, you name it, they're littered across our company. But you've also got that mixed with folks who are, 30, 35-year hoist experts and mine infrastructure designers, and people who just bring that years and years of design experience, and they know every code that exists across the globe when it comes to mine design or hoist design. And you've got that great combination of that operational experience and that design experience that really, I think, brings that value there.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time, Todd.
Absolutely. Thank you.